Okay, so Sarah,
Hi,
pleased to meet you.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah. So you saw what we did with
Yes.
Glenn. We went through a bit of a history of his passing and so forth. So probably like to be able to do the same with yourself, if that's okay.
That's fine.
And then we can we can talk about some of the things you'd like to mention to the people that we're going to be talking to in our groups.
Yes.
Yeah.
I lived on the earth much earlier than
Right.
Glenn.
Yep.
I passed in 1890
Yep.
and I lived in France when I
Right.
was on earth.
Yep.
So I'm a French woman.
Yep. And how old were
Originally.
you when you passed?
I was an old woman.
Right. Yep.
70, 80.
Yeah.
Hang on,
You
let me
can't-
think.
think back and give us an accurate.
78.
78, okay.
There you go. 78.
Takes a while thinking back that far.
Yeah.
So much has happened since,
Yes. Yeah.
particularly again recently.
Yes. Very recently for me also.
Yeah,
Most of us share that in common. There's a few little different,
yeah,
but
Yeah.
yes, I lived a lot, what I thought was a long life on earth.
You thought you were
I
pretty
was-
wise when you passed.
Yes. Quite full of myself, in
Yeah.
fact. And it's taken me a great many years to learn even the most basic lessons of humility, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps you'd like to sort of explain so you died basically of old age, the complications from old age.
An illness of old age.
Yeah,
I was quite a wealthy woman.
yeah.
And I had a number of husbands when I was on
Which would have been pretty rare back in those days.
Yes, although I'm French and so
Yeah, so of
you
course it's a
know.
bit more tolerated there.
Well, I should say I had two husbands,
Yes,
and I had a number of lovers also.
yeah,
I had children with my first husband.
yeah,
I had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy.
yeah.
And then my first husband died, in fact.
Right.
And then I spent a number of years feeling quite independent.
Yes, because you had some wealth.
Yes,
And did the
Yes.
wealth come from your own family or your husband's?
a combination.
Combination.
A combination, but largely I was left with his wealth
Right.
when he died.
Yeah,
And I enjoyed a very varied life, what I called a very cultured life. I had many luxuries, really.
Yeah.
And I very much enjoyed not having a husband after he passed,
of course.
because I felt I had the freedom of being a married woman without actually having to put up with a husband.
Yeah, put up with a husband bossing you around all the time.
Yes, yes. When I was in my 50s, I actually married again for a brief time.
And what caused you to do that?
Well,
You obviously believed yourself to be in love again.
no,
No,
not
not
really, if
really.
I'm honest.
So why did you
I
do
was
that?
using him, really.
Right.
There was a brief infatuation, but really, I wanted to. There were some issues with my wealth
Yeah.
that I wanted him to alleviate,
Right.
and also I quite enjoyed the status that he held
Right.
in society, and I wanted to have the benefit of that. Really,
Yeah. Yeah.
we remained married until I passed, but we lived very separate lives.
Yes.
We didn't spend very much
So
time
you had
together.
your own lovers.
Yes,
and your own-
and I had my own properties,
Dealings.
and I was quite separate from him.
Yeah. So he didn't take over your properties as many men would have done during that time.
No, I mean, perhaps on the surface, but really, I was very much quite a dominant
Yes.
personality, if
Yeah.
I could say that. Very strong-willed. I
Yeah.
think my own mother said that about me, but I was
Strong will is not a bad thing, is it?
no,
It
but
just
I.
depends how you exercise it in one direction.
I realise now that there was quite a lot of anger,
Yeah.
arrogance,
Yeah.
quite a lot of demand in me.
So
that-
you're very similar in a lot of ways to the women that come along to many of our groups, actually.
Yes,
Just in a modern day setting. They're in a
Yes.
modern day setting, you're in an olden day setting.
yes,
So many of the women who come along to our groups who remain single or have had these occasional relationships or have had 1 or 2 marriages or have had a few children but now they're single, again, are very similar to yourself.
yes. And what I've come to see about my life on earth was that I did a lot of taking.
Yeah,
I took what I wanted, and I had the roles that I wanted for selfish reasons, even as a mother, as a wife. I did all of these things because I wanted not to give love or even to receive love, but I wanted the benefit of society's viewpoint of my different roles.
Yes.
As a woman of society, or as a landowner, as a wealthy woman, as a mother, but also for things that it gave me personally, a sense that I was good, and a sense that I was above other people.
So you believed yourself to be superior to most?
Yes, I wouldn't have probably acknowledged that
at the time.
No. But that is what I see now.
Yep. And you also felt yourself to be a pretty good person.
I did.
In terms of like, did you grow up with a religion?
No.
So you didn't have much religious faith, but you felt yourself to be a good person on the average, compared to the average.
Well, I just didn't think much about my goodness. I didn't really care. I didn't think myself bad. I felt righteous. Is probably a better way of saying it.
Good word.
I felt righteous in my actions. And in fact, when I didn't get these things that I wanted to take from the people around me, I was very righteous in my anger also.
Right.
I was very...
felt justified to harm them in some way?
Yes, and I could be very vicious, both with my tongue and with my actions. I was quite punitive on my children as they grew into adults because they wouldn't give me the adoration really that I wanted from them. I called it respect, but really it was adoration. And one of my daughters was exposed sort of in society shamefully.
Right, so she slept with somebody.
Yes, and in fact it was something that I had done many times, but I was never, I called myself smart about it.
Yes.
Because I believed it was about playing a game with people's... It didn't matter what you did, as how people saw what you did.
Yes.
And I was very, very harsh on her and rejected her. I can see quite hypocritically, because she did something that I had done many times. But because she was found out, I felt that made it shameful, the fact that other people knew, and I was very harsh on her. And with my other two children, I often withheld money or so-called affection from them when they didn't please me. And with my husbands, I was very vicious when they didn't give me what I wanted or give me the feelings that I wanted. I felt, well, I think I've said it well in saying that I felt righteous.
Yeah, I think you've explained that fairly well. So you passed in the late 1800s, in the 1890s?
Yes.
And you arrived in the spirit world. What was your very first experience arriving in the spirit world? Somebody would have come to you at some point or tried to. Yeah,
to be honest, I don't have much
recollection of
anyone being there. It was pretty shocking, actually.
So where were
I went from being in bed surrounded by people caring for me, really.
Servants caring for you.
Yes, yes, and feeling I was unwell, but I felt quite comfortable, and to sort of a very dramatic blackness in which I felt there was a lot of rage around me, which I'm beginning
seemed to be aimed at you.
Yes.
Yes.
And what I'm beginning to understand is that perhaps that was me passing through the spirits that in the earth state. It was perhaps where I hadn't even entered the spirit world yet. It's still unclear to me.
I think if you ask Sarah, Sonia and some of the others, they'll tell you probably a little differently to that. But from what I can gather, it's about receiving some of the rage and anger from the people who you'd harmed, and not being aware of that at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
They're saying that I did. That I was drawn straight into that place.
Correct.
Yes, and I did stay in there. I stayed there for a very long time.
Yes.
feeling very hard done by.
Yes. I
Feeling
imagine.
very undeserving.
So blackness, but a terrible feeling projected at you of rage
Yes.
that you were absorbing and
Yes.
feeling.
And it felt like physical pain, in
course.
fact, more than when I was passing from
Yes.
the earth, more than the illness.
More pain than the illness actually caused you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It was like
So it's a
daggers
bodily sensation.
going through me.
Yeah.
I could feel it as anger, but it suddenly became bodily as well.
So it felt like a knife cutting through flesh
Yes.
in terms of that severe
Yes.
pain.
Stabbing, almost like stabbing.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I just became rageful. I felt this was so unjust.
Yes.
How dare anyone do this to me?
Yes.
How dare this occur? And I stayed in this sort of fight.
This rageful fighting place.
Yes, and it's still quite emotional for me to
Of course.
think about that, because I stayed in that place until very recently.
If we can ask our spirit friends again how long that was.
Yeah, over 100 years.
Yeah.
Over 100 years.
Of feeling like you're just getting stabbed every moment of the day.
And wanting to stab back.
Yeah.
And I don't know still, I'm still working, I'm through this
Yeah.
of, you know, I look to Glenn and he is much more progressed, I feel, than myself, because I
where
still
are you now in this
don't
series?
have this clear understanding.
I understand. Yeah. We can, our spirit friends will tell you where.
Yes, they're saying that I'm just in the first sphere still.
Yeah. But you've now gotten out of the.
Yes, I'm not in that
Else.
place
You're not
anymore.
out of that
Yes,
place, then?
yes.
Yeah.
In fact, they're saying that. I'm sorry, because I'm so.
It's okay. You're emotional about it. I understand.
So the daggers were happening,
Yeah.
and it feels like still my daggers were going back to those people,
Yes, of course they were.
and I feel that they were harming me and I was harming them, and I felt so that was wrong what they were doing. I felt so righteous. I felt so there was no problem with me, and how dare they do this to me?
Yeah.
And I felt so justified. I wanted to kill them.
Yeah.
To kill them.
Yeah.
I wanted that so much because I could not understand why anyone would do such a thing to me.
Yeah.
And I feel I was so righteous in myself about my own. It's hard to describe still.
Yeah.
And I stayed like that for so long, and they said how
100
long.
years.
Yeah.
Which is for most people on earth, that they can't imagine that, right?
And yes, I could never have imagined something like that.
So how recently did something change for you?
A year ago.
A year ago is what time?
Yep.
Yep.
And I got exhausted.
Yeah, with your rage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in so much pain, and I felt I couldn't keep going.
Yeah. And that's when you started to.
Well, I just stopped fighting the other people as much.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I also started to feel less pain from what.
Well, that's because you stopped fighting, you see.
Yes, yes. And I still coming to understand everything that happened.
Yeah.
So I stopped fighting. It stopped being as painful. I just wanted something different.
Yeah.
And since then, I went into an alone place then.
Yes.
I stayed alone for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even say yet that eventually I began to question my righteousness.
Yeah.
Eventually. And that is when the glimmer of light appeared. It literally seemed like I was in total blackness.
Yeah.
And there was a glimmer of light.
Yeah.
And I just moved towards it.
Yeah.
I kept moving towards it, and as I did, this questioning was happening inside of myself.
So it started exposing other feelings.
Yeah, I started to feel sad. Sometimes I was feeling sorry for myself for being so alone and that it was so unfair. And then it would revert
back again. And then,
then I found I stopped moving towards that light when I was like that.
Yeah.
And then I would start questioning again myself, and it was hard for me to start questioning myself as a person and the things I'd done.
Yeah.
But the more I allowed that, eventually I got to a place where it was sort of, the light was still off in the distance, but it felt warmer around me.
Yep.
And somebody came, Noelle came, and she started just gently, so very gently, to talk to me about my life on earth, really.
So about becoming self-aware.
Yeah.
Really about having an awakening to the sin, if you like.
Yes. Yes. And I wouldn't tolerate her for very long.
No, because
she would go away.
Emotionally traumatic hearing about the list of never-ending list of things.
It feels like that. And I've begun to feel some very badly about many of the ways that I was on earth.
Yeah.
And much of what I thought was right,
you can see now it's not so right. And you've started to feel some emotion now too, obviously.
Yes.
You started to cry when you need to and so forth. Yeah. So that's very good. Yeah.
And I'm fortunate that Noelle
helped you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without her help, it would have been probably a lot longer period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful how the spirit world is always help us when we're ready to have them, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm.
The one thing that I feel has been in my favour is that I always enjoyed sort of sparring with people on earth, having a good intellectual argument, I suppose you'd call it, proving a point or arguing an issue.
Yes.
And so this is a way that Noelle came to really be able to help me, because
should let you have some arguments.
And she'd talk to me about why what I was saying to her was wrong, and because it was logical,
you had to accept it.
Eventually I had to accept it. And this is another way that she made her way into my heart, I can see now.
She's a weasel.
Yeah. She is. And I always loved people with character as well when I was on earth.
Of course.
Real characters, and she's a character. And
yeah.
She helped me with that, and she's begun to speak to me about God as well in this same way, and it's opened my heart in a way that I didn't
expect.
I never expected.
And now you've got the opportunity for the progress to be much more rapid as a result, huh?
Yes. Yes.
Rather than having to go through years and years and years of having to deal with it in a natural way, which you've probably already observed some others attempting to do, which you can see is a long process.
I have to be careful of my arrogance, because sometimes I think, oh, well, I'll be smarter and I'll do it the quick way with God. But
well, you could say it's a quick way, but it does require a lot of sincerity and truth, doesn't it? And heartfelt desire. And
I know that my competitiveness is a part of the problems that I had when I was on earth.
And you're yet to discover some of the reasons why those particular emotions are there too, hey?
I don't know. I think this is just the way that I am really still. It's hard to...
Yeah, what obviously Noelle is going to do is help you go back through your childhood in particular, and help you grieve some of the things that happened there, which will have a large change for your life. Yeah.
So far, the grief that has come up for me has been beginning to realise that I was not righteous in the way that I treated other people.
That's very good. Repentance is a very important process. So now we've got a bit of a picture of your life, and obviously it's been quite traumatic for you for those 120 years or so that you spent in that place. And obviously that's something, that obviously we have a lot of compassion for. But I was wondering if what you would like to share. Obviously, Sonia and her group took you to observe some of the people who come along to our groups and who might attend our assistance group. What would you want to say to them, do you think?
Well, I see a lot of you who are as full of yourselves as I was of myself when I was on earth.
Yeah.
Many women who share the same attitudes that have created so much pain for myself and for my children and my husbands and really everyone that I knew socially in France. I can see that the path that you're on only leads to pain and loneliness.
And many of them are already alone, really.
Yes. And I can see that I was so lonely as well, but I covered it over with rage, and I was terrible to my servants, and I was terrible to the people to my children, to everyone in my life. And I really made them stay near me through fear and humiliation by the end. And so I feel concerned for so many who we've been taken to visit who are following this same path without any. They would look to my life and to my sharing of my life and think it has nothing in common with theirs. But that's how I would have looked at my own life as well. And it's only on passing where I reaped the terrible consequences of that life that for so long that even made me start to begin to question my own sense that I was right about everything. And, you know, I see that many women today on earth have a lot more power to make choices, which I think is good. They're not in need of a husband. But the sad thing that I observe is that they live with just as much rage as I had, and they do not see how harsh they are upon everyone, how much they demand from people around them rather than give to them.
Yeah, it's hard to convince somebody, isn't it, to examine themselves in the light of what you're saying when they themselves already believe that they're not the same as what you are. And what I mean by that is that, you know, most of the women would not believe themselves to be in the condition that you passed, and yet they are in the condition that you passed.
Yes.
And in fact, for many, it's actually quite worse because many of them have also had abortions and other things which have darkened their condition even further, and which add to the darkness.
And perhaps if I could just encourage people to think about what their real feelings are about the people around them and what they want
from them,
and what they feel they are righteous in.
And when they get righteously angry, what it's about.
Yes. I wish that someone had come to me. Well, I wish that someone had come to me many times in my life. I can see that my daughters tried to talk to me about this. They're probably the only people in my life, and they didn't do it obviously in a calm and
no, because they were
already
manner. Being harmed by your ways.
They were
naturally they would have been quite angry.
They were attempting to you know, stop the terrible treatment, really.
Yeah.
And to they were indignant.
Yes.
But none of us were very self-aware enough to really understand the dynamics, and I do see that in many people who attend your groups, and even many daughters who attend your groups, so younger women.
Yes.
Feeling very...
They've already gone through the same process by a very young age nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah. So they've often women in your time didn't have the means to go through that process, let alone the circumstances.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that my example is of much use. I feel a little ashamed
No,
about
honestly,
what I've
I
showed
feel
you.
it's very good that you've had the courage to come and talk to us about it. Because my concern for many people on this planet is that many people are engaging behaviours that if they actually knew what their long-term life was going to be like, they might have a pause about their behaviour. So if you
I wish I had paused.
if you had somebody come to you when you're in your young, teens or early 20s in the time, in the early 1800s when you're alive, and explained to you that the direction that you were taking might lead you to this terrible 120 years of tormented state, you might have reconsidered some of the decisions you were making.
Sadly, I probably would have laughed in their face, but if someone could have impressed it upon me, I would have reconsidered my choices.
Do you think at the time of passing anything could have happened? If there was one thing, I remember asked Len, if there was one thing that changed at the time of passing, what would have helped him? Is there anything that you can think of that would have helped you at the time of passing to not have to experience 120 years of torture, basically?
It's still difficult for me to understand. It's so. It was such a very strong, and as I said earlier, I was even confused and still almost confused about, could this be the afterlife? How could this be the next place I went to? And I didn't even want to sort of acknowledge it as more than a dream for a long time, of something not real.
Just like a horrific dream.
Like a nightmare.
Bad nightmare.
Yes. And it's difficult for me to think of something that could have changed because I was so enthralled in
the state you were in by that stage.
Yes.
And that's the thing, isn't it? God's obviously with each person trying to get, each person arrives at the conclusion in the same in the same way, in the sense that they have to be helped to get beyond where they arrived once they've passed, to get into a state where they can at least make even a choice to do something different.
And that's exactly what I feel had to happen with me. It was exhausting and horrible. But I don't know how it could have been different given how righteous I felt.
Yes.
And I still feel sadness that I was still willing. I wanted to kill. I was willing to be violent towards others immediately that they were angry with me, and I did that for so many years. And
you sort of think of it as after you've passed, but if you actually reflect, you can see that you actually had those violent tendencies before you passed.
Yes, no, I can see that.
And it was only society's viewpoint of view that prevented you from taking those actions.
And I was so vicious with the people around me. It was abuse, and the feelings of daggers, I suppose, came out of me all the time.
So there was this feeling in you that it was okay to send those feelings towards them, because it was justified and righteous. You were right and they were wrong.
Yes, and I suppose that I never reached the point where I could feel a desire to be physically violent, because I had so much control and wealth of over the people around me that I never faced a situation where a group of people were outwardly and openly angry with me because I could control so much.
Whereas as soon as you passed, I
couldn't control that. And so then you're right, it exposed to me, even though I didn't want to see it for such a long time, it exposed to me the true state of myself. So I wish I could say more to help the women such as I see who are so much like how I was. And
well, one question I'd like to ask you is what you've had to do after Noelle has come to you. What have you had to do since? So what's you've engaged is this argumentative banter initially, and then obviously you were convinced with some logic. So logic has had to, you've had to allow logic to enter you, haven't you?
Yes, and I should say that the argumentativeness was nowhere near as harsh as when I was on Earth.
Sort of picture
it was
it as
more banter,
yes,
we could call it. Or,
conversational free-for-all, shall we call it?
Yes.
Which is actually very good for you.
Yes.
Yes, because it helps you be presented with new ideas that you haven't contemplated before.
It felt very therapeutic for me to actually, and I had spent so long in a non-thinking state, really, in a just a frenzy, and I felt so depleted, and she has been so caring with me. It was possible for me then. It felt like a soothing thing almost to engage with someone, and I suppose I had become ready for new ideas by then. I've had to reconsider, I've had to let myself be challenged about everything that I thought was right about myself. I've had to listen when she's presented to me that perhaps I was not right, and listen to the logic of what she said. And then I've had to feel that it's somehow reached my heart more.
And you had to take time to feel that too.
Yes, and she would leave me sometimes just after a few words back and forth, because I could feel that I needed so much to consider. It was like undoing a whole life of believing I was right and having to go back and consider maybe what I think is right
is just wrong.
It's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's not even half right. It's just wrong.
Or it's just not my personal opinion. It's just wrong.
Or it's just not a privilege that I should enjoy because of who I am. It's just wrong. And
can I say though that for many who are here with us now on Earth, the problem is that they're not even going to get into the state when you first arrived for many of them, because they will still want their addictions met. So many of them are still going to continue to be earthbound, unfortunately. And that will exacerbate this problem even further, because they'll get darker and darker and into a darker condition than when you actually arrived. You went almost straight from your deathbed to the location where you were no longer earthbound, but still feeling all of this attack from others and anger from others, from obviously and then you were angry in return, but you didn't go, you had all of your addictions removed instantly. Whereas many of the people who would pass now, and particularly people who know about God's truth and know that the spirit world exists and know that they can stay earthbound, many of them may actually choose to continue to engage these addictions for an even longer period of time once they pass. So actually many of the people you're referring to may actually finish up arriving in a much worse condition.
I hope that they don't do that. I hope so much.
So do I, and unfortunately that's not the choices they're currently making.
I don't know, I still don't know how to impress upon a person to reconsider their state of righteousness.
When they're in a state of righteousness.
Yes.
It's very difficult, and you can see that's why the place you were in was the best place for you for that time. Because yes, it's very unusual for a person to be self-reflective when they've been taught to be self-righteous.
And it grows over time.
It does.
And living a life of being separate from others, separate from a husband or separate from anyone who's different from you
Yeah.
means that there's never a challenge. But perhaps if I could implore them just to consider who they avoid and why, or when they're angry, why they think it's okay,
Yes.
or what
they're
their children
self-righteous,
are
yeah.
trying to tell them.
Yeah.
I can see there were many times in my life, my children and other people, it was there if I would only look.
Yeah.
People were trying to tell me, even though I was formidable, really, they were trying to tell me in some way that I was
That there was a problem.
horrible. And I just took power over them, and I condescended to them, and I belittled them as a way of undermining everything that they said to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is very, very difficult for an arrogant or self-righteous person to make the breakthrough. Very difficult, and I appreciate the fact that you have. I understand how difficult it is. I've observed the difficulties many have faced with that problem, and it is a large problem on this planet today. So there are going to be many people who pass from the earth today, unless they have some more self-reflection, arriving in a similar condition. But I think all we can do really is educate them about the truth of what happens to the person who arrives in that condition, which you've done, which is very good, and also to implore them to have a bit more self-analysis and self-reflection, and to also, like you said, observe their anger and their other emotions as they express them, to see that they're actually unloving emotions and therefore need to be addressed and much more honestly and sincerely.
Well, I hope that it might be of some help sharing my story.
Yeah, I think it will be, certainly, and it's very good that you had the courage to talk to us about it. And I know dragging up your history is difficult at times, and so I appreciate the fact that you allowed me to do that.
I know that partly it's important for me to speak about the ways that I've harmed others, and
it will certainly help with the repentance, and as you know, that's the key now to work through. If you want to progress rapidly, that's the key. And in fact, that's the same lesson that many of these ladies on earth that we're talking about are also going to need to learn, that repentance is the key to their progression too.
And perhaps before I go, I should just mention I've spoken mainly to the women, but there
are many men in that.
Yes, I've just been prompted
Yes.
to say that there are also men
I agree.
who have these same issues that I've had on earth.
Yes. And in fact, many men have them to an even more severe degree.
Yes.
Because there is the allowance of men to be generally more arrogant than women.
Yes.
Well, hopefully we've given our audience a bit to reflect upon there. So I'm very happy that you came and spoke to us. There was one other person I feel that wanted to speak, but Mary may just need a short break before that happens.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, very nice to meet you.